it broke my heart over the weekend, seeing this news come across. When I first found out about it, it wasn't even something that, I had looked up. It was just one of my friends texting me like, "Hey, did you hear? Like Matthew Perry passed away." And I was like, "What? Like, where did you see that?" And then I got the message with like a link to the TMZ article, and then I just Googled it too, and I was like, TMZ was the only one reporting it for some time, and then like
Yeah.
I think the New York Post picked it up, and then a few other sites, but it literally took from that point in time to like a couple of hours later that all the bigger outlets started to pick up on it, because it seemed like they were just trying to get confirmation, because I think sometimes TMZ can jump the gun. It wouldn't be the first time that we would have, seen the news like turn out to be not true. Because anything you mentioned that I think they were going off of like, oh, someone was found at Matthew Perry's address,
Well,
unconscious,
I
in the
think that that
jacuzzi.
was the first Deadline article to come out. So you texted me, I was like in the car and I didn't believe you actually. So I
Yeah,
Googled it. And there were only two reports out. One was TMZ, which obviously I never click on. And then the second was Deadline. But even Deadline was quoting the TMZ article. And I think LAPD had announced that someone was found dead at the scene at Matthew Perry's address, but obviously they didn't make that connection. TMZ made the connection, um, and it took a while for them to
yeah.
confirm, and only really as of I guess really yesterday and today have I mean SAG commented. Obviously, Friends made a joint. The joint Friends cast made a joint
Statement
statement
on,
about it. His family made a statement about it. The Canadian
yeah.
Prime Minister, who
Which was
actually,
like I didn't even know that like the Canadian Justin Trudeau was his
oh,
classmate in school,
yeah,
which was
they
like,
went to school together, which is so sad too. Just overall, like, really heartbreaking. Like, I feel like we lost such a huge piece of this generation's culture. I mean,
yeah.
Friends was such a movement. It was one of the longest running shows for a really
It's
long time.
like the weird, and the thing is that you wouldn't imagine that being the case because of the fact that the show first started airing in 1994 and it ended its run in the early 2000s. Between you and I, we were like not even old enough to really be talking in full sentences back then. So to us, we grew up on this show after it finished airing, and a lot of us today, our age especially, or even younger, like discovered this show through streaming, through Netflix, and now in Max, like you can, or like especially like some people's end point was like, oh, what is this big Friends thing? Then they watch Friends reunion, and they were like, well, let me go like watch more of the show itself. Like I was looking at some articles about this before the show, and literally, so this was it blew my mind, right? Like because we talk about TV as being like such a there's so many options to watch TV out there, but it wasn't too long ago. Like the 1990s may feel like they are a distant memory in some ways, but and it's because they're almost like 1994 was almost 3 decades ago.
I
But
wasn't born yet. Just
right, well, me neither. But like like when the show started airing and Matthew Perry was 24, like he was the youngest of the main cast members, but like in its heyday, like basically the Friends show averaged like 25 million people at the peak of its prime, like basically
Mhm.
on like throughout its run. And then also it was in the top 10 of like primetime TV, like ratings, like throughout all 10 seasons.
Yeah.
25 million, just to give you some sense of context, to average 25 million viewers in primetime television in today's world, there's only one television property that gets anywhere close to that on a regular basis, and that's the NFL. Nobody else, no other show or no other like reality show, no other scripted show gets any not even like halfway there on a regular basis, because we were kind of past that era of we don't have any like super iconic sitcoms, like, and it was just a different time, like in the 90s. Like of course TV habits have changed, people are streaming more nowadays, so you can't really make an apples to apples comparison, but just to think about it, if it was averaging 25 million people watching it live, and then of course maybe some people like taped it on the VCRs and stuff, or like maybe they were the early adopters of a DVR subscription, I don't know, like back then people like probably still watched it after it aired and on re-airs, and a lot of people again found it on syndication before Netflix was a thing, and then Netflix had it for years, and now Max has it. The show like affected millions of people while it aired, and millions more since then. It kind of felt like you said, like your child, like part of your childhood. Like to me, I can relate it to when like Jason David Frank passed away, and he was like the most iconic Power Ranger of all time. And I'm like, I grew up loving Power Rangers, and like, and I've watched every series with him in it. And like basically up until a certain point a few years ago, I would be able to tell you what every season of Power Rangers was about, who were the cast members, what color Rangers did they have, how many were there, and like Jason David Frank was like part of like virtually half of them. So like similarly, like Matthew Perry, like Chandler Bing, he's like for a lot of people, Friends is that show. Like for me, it's that show that I'm like feeling stressed out. I need something to ground me. Like if I'm feeling like overwhelmed by something going on in my life, like turn on Friends or turn on The Office. Like these are shows that really are like your go-to shows. And Chandler was a character who was so affable, so relatable because of Matthew Perry's like ability as an actor. His comedic timing was iconic. He's probably one of the most iconic primetime sitcom actors of all time. And Friends is by many metrics the most iconic TV show, certainly the most iconic sitcom of all time. And like I remember, we were talking about this before we started the taping here. That it was like a feeling of shock, the kind of feeling of shock to somebody like a big celebrity, a well-known person passing away that I haven't really felt since Kobe Bryant passed away. And I remember when that happened, it was like the way the news spread and how like everybody was like even hours later people were like, no, like wait, what, like no, you gotta be kidding, like kids. And by that time like Sports Center had it all over, all the coverage, they had like all the people like giving them updates to like the crash site and everything. And I first found out about it when I was on like a Zoom call with somebody at the time, like on my laptop, and I saw this notification come across. I'm like, what, like are you sure? Like it was just this sense of shock. And I, in some ways, I think to me, even like a few days later, that hasn't quite gone away yet, because it's like almost like it's not like a member of your family, but you kind of feel like, okay, so now I live in a world where that person is no longer there, like and it's you can't turn back the clock anymore.
The Kobe Bryant thing was also so crazy because I think that was so felt on a physical level here in LA too, because I remember being on a hike and I
Yeah,
remember seeing something, and I saw all the helicopters swirling, and everyone in LA knew something really bad happened before it was even announced that it was Kobe Bryant. They
yeah,
just, you could see the smoke, you could see all the sirens, you knew something was wrong. So in a way, the Kobe Bryant death felt a little bit more shocking. It felt a little than unfortunately Matthew Perry's death did, although it did catch me so off guard. I mean, it's so sad to lose such an icon. In a way, his death makes me think of Naya Rivera even more because I grew up watching Glee. Um, and while Friends was such a pivotal show, I was watching Glee in real time. You know what I mean? So it's like I've gone back, I've watched Friends. We all know who Chandler Harding is. It's just so sad too because it's like you grow up with these characters, you grow up with these actors that create these characters that leave a lasting impression on you. And I feel like so many people feel this way about Friends. It is such a culturally staple show in the US. I do feel like it helps. I feel like it's influenced all of our lives in some way. Like if you've seen the show, there are so many lessons to be learned about friendship, about love, about there's laughs and there are, but there's so
yeah.
many lessons in the show, and I think that
And
that's also so groundbreaking about it.
the show, you groundbreaking is the perfect word to describe the show, because there's so many themes, so many like elements of just commentary on society and how our world works, things that they did in the show in the 90s that today we are like, well, that's kind of normal, but back in the 90s it was like very like forward thinking and not something that was a norm. Like for example, the whole surrogate, like Phoebe being a surrogate for her brother's kids, like that whole thing. Or like, do you remember the scene when like Rachel gets pregnant and Ross and Rachel decide to like, and like they're, oh, you're gonna get married, right? Like no, and then the Joey's like, well, I'm gonna propose to you, and like nowadays we look at that and almost like in an antiquated sense, but back in the 90s, those were like big like conversation points. Like when they were doing this, like the writers, the creators, and of course the actors, including Matthew Perry, like the show broke new ground in ways that I think some people watching the show discovering for the first time today may not realize, because they don't have the context living and watching the show in the 90s. And
Exactly.
sitcoms, more than a lot of shows, are like a product of their time, and in many ways reflect, the what was going on in the world around that show. And I think Friends, much like, even like shows like The Office or Parks and Recreation, like those shows are shows like, if you were to make Friends today, you would make it different, because the show, it takes place in our world, and it has to reflect, what our values are, who we are as a people today, and where we are going and want to go, and what the writers decide to do with that. And but while you do have the time capsule effect to it, there's also a timelessness to it, like you mentioned, like, especially like Chandler, the character of Chandler Bing, or Chandler Bong, if you go back that one episode where they're playing the quiz game, like it's like, he's got this like things like this unique eccentricities to his character, like the whole I cannot be talking about this, right, like, the whole emphasis on the wording and all that, and some of his like one liners and comebacks, like I think when we were doing our tribute video for Matthew Perry, which we will show in a little bit here. It was just I kind of like I just went down a rabbit hole, a couple of hours, just like reminiscing and watching like these clips of all of Chandler's like best, funniest moments or comeback and one line. It's just, and that it's special when you're watching it, and it just naturally puts a smile on your face. When the video ends, you realize that you're smiling year to year. And it just, like, and me being so sick right now, there hasn't been a lot for me that like has put a smile on my face this past few days. But watching that, like, I actually at one point like audibly heard myself just like cackle, and I was like, oh, that, like, and of course in doing so I heard my like very sick voice for the first time in a couple of hours, because I was trying not to talk. But it was just like a reminder of how a show like Friends, and how like an actor like Matthew Perry could make you smile on your worst day. And I think, to me, that was like, the most like valuable thing that he brought to the table, to the world, and his biggest contribution to like Hollywood, to our pop culture, to our society as a whole, because that is going to be immortalized forever. People decades from now will be watching Friends, and will be discovering maybe Chandler Bing for the first time, and then if they do their research, they'll discover about Matthew Perry, the person he was, and his own struggles with, fame, with alcohol and substance abuse. And not just the struggle. I mean, he fought through it. He was very open about it. He did not give up. He wrote a book recently, a memoir of sorts, where he talked about that. It was a New York Times bestseller. And like, I think that's a book that a lot of people are going to pick up now and read up on, because maybe we didn't. It happens all the time. Maybe we don't appreciate the people when they're with us as much as we do once they're gone. But yeah, friends will live on forever, and as will the memory of Matthew Perry, and of course all the other projects that he took part of for years, like The Odd Couple, the other sitcoms, the ones that he was a part of before we knew him to be an iconic actor back in the 80s, including the one with his dad, who got him into Hollywood, like, a talented actor whose career spanned multiple decades. But yeah, we, as I mentioned earlier, we put together a video tribute, as we do with our Also Memorable series, for the people that we as a team, feel are the most special to us. And if they pass away, like, if it brings a tear to our eyes, we know it's bringing a tear to many of people's eyes. So we put together a small tribute, and we'd like for you guys to, if you would like to check it out, and let's reminisce in Matthew Perry's memory, and remember him for the affable, amazing actor and person that he was.
They say the brightest stars burn the fastest, so we must love them while we can. Matthew Langford Perry, born in Williamstown, Massachusetts, to a Canadian journalist mother and an American actor father. He grew up in Canada, attending West Carleton Secondary School and Ashbury College. As a teenager, he showed a talent for tennis, and for a time, trained to go pro. But this dream fell by the wayside when Perry moved to Los Angeles at age 15 to live with his dad. There, he studied acting at the Buckley School in Sherman Oaks, then honed his comic skills with improv classes at LA Connection during high school. And while his acting career began with a bevy of cameo roles on shows like 240 Robert, Charles in Charge, and and Silver Spoon in the 80s. His first regular role came in the Fox comedy Second Chance. But of course, it wasn't until the early 90s when Perry was cast in the role of Chandler Bing in the now iconic sitcom Friends, a key part of what became one of the most successful shows of all time was Perry's wit, incisive comedic timing, and affability that made the character of Chandler Bing one of the most iconic characters to ever grace primetime television.
Some girl ate Monica.
Shut up. The camera adds 10 pounds.
So how many cameras are actually on you?
As the saying goes, fame often comes with a price. And for Perry, he paid a hefty one in his decades-long battle with alcohol and substance abuse. A battle he fought valiantly and aided others in when they sought him out for it. From being the youngest star of Friends to his time on the CBS revival of The Odd Couple, to his heartwarming return in Friends: The Reunion, the memory of Matthew Perry will live on, forever, in the hearts and minds of the millions of friends he made over a celebrated career on television, film, and beyond. A friend forever. We'll be there for you.